Hi, Joe. It's really nice to speak to you again. Welcome to the
Good
show.
evening. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I understand it's 6 years since we first
It
had
is.
chats about this topic.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking actually that we've been doing shows probably at a similar type of time that the women have been waiting to get their pensions.
Absolutely. I mean, it just is barbaric, isn't it, that they've been kept waiting like this. Anyway,
We have a new
we're
government, don't we? But the challenges are many.
oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, poor start. And I don't think um, prospects are looking good for the budget in October for
Mm.
anybody, by the way, not
Yeah.
only 50s women.
Yeah. So I'll start off, Joe, with what are the potential outcomes if SEED or in law decide to proceed with postponed judicial review?
Well, yeah, that's something we're considering, and we held back to see developments, and actually, as Joselyn said on the steps of number 10, Dr. Joselyn Scott said on the steps of number 10, we are actively considering it. So if a JR is successful, the court may quash the decision made by the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, requiring the decision to be reconsidered in a lawful manner. So basically, the refusal to mediate were unlawful. So that decision would be reconsidered in a lawful manner. The court could also declare the decision unlawful. That may not change the outcome, but would formally recognise the legality of the decision-making process. The court might issue orders requiring the Secretary of State to take specific actions or prohibiting certain actions, depending on the findings of the JR, of course. And the court would also issue an injunction to prevent the Secretary of State from continuing with current course of action until the decision is lawfully considered. So it would be worth pursuing that route, is our current thinking. We wanted a full-blown fight in court. We are confident about our position, and our counsel, John Cooper, who is a top silk, he said this is an important challenge for 50s women in this country. The weight of evidence indicates a grave injustice to them, and we will robustly represent their interests as we move forward with the assistance of our legal team. We shall succeed for all those women. You know, it's clear case that the Secretary of State refused unlawfully reasonable invitations to mediate with CEDAW in law. So we're in a very strong position, and we're delighted to be in that unique position on the back of experts' work, all our work over the years. And uniquely, CEDAW in law is solely in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Older people's rights at the forefront of the Claudia Mahler at IE-older persons work. Does
Yeah,
this give hope to retirees who will no longer receive the winter fuel allowance?
my goodness, the winter fuel allowance, that has caused incredible blowback. So there's been a deluge of objections to the removal of the winter fuel allowance, and it's prompted us to invite victims to share their experiences of the impact of the winter fuel allowance removal, combined with other draconian policies like taxing pensioners, forcing them back to work, paying more tax, national insurance. I mean, the NHS is on its knees. There's no dentistry, social care, and even the state pension itself is in jeopardy. There's rumours of prescriptions, bus passes, and the 25% council tax discount being in jeopardy too. Undoubtedly, a Christmas carol story is to be told. We imagine that the winter fuel allowance might be reinstated at Christmas, and another group is talking about a hardship fund to be launched at that point. Well, That's not good enough. We have our remedy, and for all 50s women. And actually, the DWP published equality analysis. And if I could just give you a few facts here.
Yeah.
2.7 million men, 2.7 million aged 80 plus will lose out. 7.3 million 66 to 70-year-old women will lose out. And obviously that includes 50s women. The 80 plus years proportionally worse off financially. 5.2 million women will lose out. 4.8 million men will lose out. And 1.6 million people with a disability will lose out. So look, CEDAW in law is considering making an argument of indirect discrimination here on sex grounds, as more women are impacted because more women are dependent on the fuel allowance, as more women are older because of women's longevity. So, that's being troubleshot at the moment. It's totally unacceptable, and we really will welcome 50s women in particular writing to us letters about the impact of what we've just said. We will send it into the UN, in Geneva, and we'll be there next month, by the way. And we will give them the evidence and say, this is what's happening to older people in the UK right now.
Yeah.
And we sincerely hope that the government rethinks its draconian policies that it's currently implementing on pensions and 50s women.
Yeah, because they're coming under quite a lot of pressure, aren't they, from many groups and a lot of people now to rethink that policy.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've scanned social media and I can't find any positive comments except by the Labour Party itself. There was no other party that voted for it, by the way. It was all whipped Labour MPs. And I think it's a very dim position if you have to whip Labour MPs to do something that no other party is voting for. I mean, it won't bode well in any election. I think that's already playing out negatively for them.
Yeah. I wanted to move on now to, is the state legally bound by the CEDAW Treaty?
Absolutely. The ratification of the optional protocol and the CEDAW Convention itself obligates the UK state party because it signifies the state party's formal consent to be legally bound by the terms of the protocol. So they have agreed to be legally bound by ratifying the optional protocol and CEDAW itself. And by the way, within that protocol is a temporary special measure. And a temporary special measure is a parliamentary mechanism. It's got a track record of success. It has the power to deliver swift financial remedy. And our remedy is payment of an initial lump sum for each identified victim and additional payments atop of the state pension payments over 5 years for those whose NICs entitle them to compensation equal to their sums deferred. There'd be no tax. Benefits will not be affected. We're calling for free dental opticians, prescriptions, and the named beneficiary should any person pass away during the 5-year period. And by the way, next month in Geneva, the General Recommendation 40 is coming into play, where women will lead at decision tables under the CEDAW Treaty. And we're super keen to get that rubber stamped. And women must lead as well as men. Women can speak for themselves. Men can speak for themselves. And it's time for women to decide policies about themselves and have a say in those policies. Because when the state pension age rises were implemented, it was mostly men in Parliament, very few women. And that's why we believe it happened. One of the reasons it happened.
Yes. Now, is civil society involved in Beijing Plus 30 2024 and the 69th session on the status of women in 2025?
Absolutely, yes. And CEDAW in law will be represented at both those global platforms for action, and our itinerary includes meetings with experts, and we are very buoyed by those invitations, and so watch this space.
Right.
Yeah. Everything that comes out of those meetings is a positive for women.
Yeah. Now, as it per its statement, the legal team found the former Secretary of State for Work and Pensions refusals to join reasonable invitations to mediation with CEDAW in law. What, if anything, has changed?
I would say nothing's changed because the newly ensconced government has yet to come to the table, similarly to the former government. So we're exploring legal aid opportunities to pursue such talks as we speak. And as I said earlier, and you've just indicated, we have a clear case that the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions refused unlawfully reasonable invitations to mediate. And we are confident that this important challenge for 50s women, the weight of evidence indicates a grave injustice, said our counsel, and we will robustly represent those interests, and we shall succeed for all those women.
Yeah, there's lots of women there, isn't there, really dependent on this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's about, well, it's said that 250,000 have died. I think that is a very low estimate, and I wouldn't be surprised if it were twice that amount, because we've had COVID and we've had long COVID, and, you know, poverty kills people. And we know 50s women were destitute. Michael Mansfield, KC, said a subclass had been created by this discrimination. And that means one thing, you know, death. And since he said that, it's plain to see that he was right. We fear for the future for 50s women and all vulnerable groups, by the way.
There's still quite a few of them yet to get the pensions, aren't there? The ones in the late 50s, I think, still are waiting.
Yeah. I don't know how they're coping, and I don't know how they're coping. Some women write to us and say, I'm still working. I'm 69, I'm still working. I was a carer for my mother. She died. I lost my house. I couldn't get a job because of, you know, my age. And I wasn't fit to work because of everything that had happened. And, you know, they're just looking at destitution and probably homelessness in the end, because if these draconian policies carry on, all this talk about the triple lock next year and pensioners are going to be richer, really, I mean, that just does not stand on that argument. The state pension is half the national living wage, and they want to tax pensioners. Now, come on, please. Now, if I were an MP and it said that Labour MPs were in the lobbies voting on the winter fuel allowance crying, no, don't stand there crying. Who are you crying for? This is the question that we're asking. Are you crying for yourself? Are you crying for the people who you are betraying? And that's what 50s women say, that they feel betrayed, and so do pensioners, by the way. No, they should never have been whipped in the first place. And had they all got together, as one of my colleagues said, and stood up against this whipping, they could have removed Labour's majority in the decision, in the vote. Why not do that?
And just to mention that the fuel cap's about to go up again, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's happened, actually. Well, notifications have gone out. I've seen a couple of notifications that, saying it's changed. There's a whole list of things that, well, it's not only 50s women that are facing the cost of living crisis. No, it isn't. However, because they're the least resilient to cope with these draconian measures, we're speaking up for them. They're speaking up for themselves. They're not the victims they were 6 years ago. Believe me, this is a motivated, mobilised voting bloc, and they're not going to be trodden on,
No.
Take your feet off our necks, is what they say.
And I wanted to ask you, Jo, we've talked about all the things that are happening, but is there a means to compel the government to act?
There is. We understand there is. So, if we wish to compel a government to perform a duty they are legally obligated to complete, or to correct an abuse of a discretion, there's something called a writ of mandamus, we understand. And we're exploring that at the moment. Apparently 50s women are being denied a legal right by someone with a legal duty who has failed to act. So I think it's worth looking into and to see where that might take us and compel them to act. We would much rather sit down at a table and mediate. And given that the refusals to mediate were unlawful, we have a very strong hand to compel them to do so, is what we understand. So, look, the situation is this. We have a handful of early day motions signed by hundreds of MPs across the House. We will take these letters about the winter fuel allowance impact. We'll take the cross-party support. We've got a humongous alternative dispute resolution group containing 7 party leaders supporting us. And uniquely, CEDAW in law represents 3.5 million 50s women whose enforceable rights legal rights are in play. Not 7% of 3.5 million 50s women, as another group we understand represents. No. This is about all 50s women who have paid their national insurance contributions or for other reasons are entitled to a state pension. We have a uniquely proportional remedy. We know how to take it through Parliament. And when we hear these figures about, this is going to cost, some humongous figure. No, it will cost nothing, because what they have to pay to us, 50s women, is our earned dues. The investment that we contributed to the National Insurance Fund, and we're entitled legally to those earned dues to be returned, given that it was undoubtedly discrimination, as per the Honourable Dr. Joselyn Scott's judge's report, and actually the President's report as well, because that looked at the performance of the UK state parties' obligations under the CEDAW Treaty, and believe me, they did not come out well, and they still do not come out well. The CEDAW inquiry is in transit in Geneva, and we've got the General Recommendation 40, where women will be leading at decision tables. We're calling for mediation. Enforceable laws are in play here. Both domestic and international laws have been breached, proven to have been breached. And we have options about what we can do now. We can pursue this writ if we choose. We can pursue the parliamentary route. We can pursue the international treaty route. we understand that Lord Guyot indicated when he resigned that any breach of a treaty is tantamount to misconduct in public office. Sorry, I was trying to think of that phrase then, so I got it right. So it's misconduct in public office to breach an international treaty, says Lord Guyot. So I'm sure he would not have written to the former Prime Minister telling him those facts about international treaties and the consequences of breaching them. If he's sure of his ground, and therefore we are.
Yeah. Jo, I wanted to mention before you go that Dr. Joselyn Scott has made a delivery to Downing Street, hasn't she? Fairly recently I saw a post.
Yeah.
I wondered if you want to mention that.
Well, that was really exciting, actually. I mean, well, if it hadn't been for Joselyn, post the first JR, when we were told, having been granted a hearing on the basis of every argument raised being accepted to be heard, and then given a one-line decision of it's out of time, Joselyn authored a paper and provided a dissenting opinion against that, which is a really strong clamp down on that, let's say, questionable decision.
Yeah.
It's probably more than that, but it's an abuse of that discretion, we would suggest. And she's done so much for 3.5 million 50s women, and without Joselyn, we wouldn't be holding the hand we have now, which is the law on side, the ethics on side, the moral high ground. And she is closely in following us and is so thrilled to do what she can to help. Pro bono, let me tell you, all these years she's been working with us, it's pro bono expertise. We went along to number 10 and Joselyn stood outside and called for mediation and explained about the enforceable laws and explained about all the support that we have, and said that, it's time for the government to come to the table. And obviously any mediation means negotiation. And yes, we have our remedy, which I've talked about, and that would be the basis of discussions. But we're not going to be having this £22 billion black hole. No, that's their problem. Even, I'm not, there's a big question mark over that £22 billion actually, because they were asked to detail how that £22 billion was arrived at, and I understand they're still waiting for an answer.
Right.
So, yeah, it will cost nothing to reimburse 50s women, because all the 50s women have contributed to national insurance contributions in the National Insurance Fund, which, by the way, David Henke wrote about, and he said, due to the failure of a tripartite agreement between the Treasury, employers and employees, namely the Treasury failed to contribute its percentage into the fund for a number of years, £271 billion was missing from that fund. And he actually said the fund was raped. Yeah, so you can't be doing that and then say there's no money left. And by the way, back in the day, the government failed to publish the pension age report. I think it was 2017, if memory serves. And because they failed to do that until after the election that year, they saved themselves £74 billion and the election, because what was in that report was bad news about the state pension age changing again.
Yeah. And
Josephine Cumbo of the Financial Times, she said, and Paul Lewis of Moneybox Live called them out on it and said that it was unlawful. And I think it was David Gauke that was supposed to publish it and never, if my memory serves. So all those billions of pounds, let's say, missing.
Yeah.
And even now, funding free ports with NICs, corporations within the free ports, they've got concessions about national insurance contributions. The fund was also raided to pay off the national debt. And we understand there's moves in that direction again. And because CRND fund is holding funds on behalf of the National Insurance Fund, I'm led to believe. So, yeah, I mean, in the future, will anybody get a state pension? Big question mark on that.
Very difficult one to answer, that one, isn't it? About the future of state pensions.
We're fighting for 50s women, but actually, for those enlightened people, were they to support 50s women, what they're doing is actually safeguarding their own futures as well.
Yeah.
Because, we are saying that national insurance funds should be managed by those who make contributions, as well as other people, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you make a contribution, then you should have a say on how that money is spent.
Yeah. Jo, I'd like to thank you for coming on today, and it's always good to talk to you. And I wanted to wish all the 1950s women out there the best for the ongoing situation. And we'll hear from you again very soon, hopefully.
Yeah. And bless you, Ian, for your loyalty, and singularly, you have given 50s women a voice in the media. And when our story is told, that fact will be echoing eternity on the right side of history.
But it's very good to be here to support you, Jo, and we keep going, don't we? We keep on with the journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We shall succeed.
Thank you, Jo.
Good evening.